Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, okay. I was 34 years old, living my best life as a young single bachelorette in the big city. Originally from Dallas, I had moved to Chicago 10 years prior. I worked at a big advertising agency. I was traveling the country, doing events with major brands and celebrities. I was living the life. These are some pictures from my Chicago life. I was skiing, I was running. I started running half marathons. I went skydiving, vacations. I was living the typical single. I didn't have any kids, so I was free. I could do whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. And I'd built this incredible professional network. I'd made lifelong friends, and I was pretty content with the situation that I was in. So also during this time, I would come home to visit my mom and grandmother in Dallas. Both my father and my grandfather, who also had Alzheimer's, had passed away a few years earlier, and my grandmother now had Alzheimer's and had moved in with my mom. I noticed that my mom was struggling to take care of my grandmother, but I figured her issues were just from the stress of her job. She was the manager of the credit union at our church, and that's a pretty stressful job. She didn't have much help there. And so I kind of just figured any issues she was having were related to that. It wasn't until I got a phone call that I realized just how bad it was. And so this is a picture from the earlier years of me, my mom, and my grandmother. So that phone call, my mom called me and said she was following an ambulance to the hospital and my grandmother was in it. My grandmother had been at a family friend's house while my mom was at work, and she had gotten so worked up and gotten violent with the family friend that that the friend had to call my mom to come get her. And so when my mom got there, she couldn't calm her down either. And my grandmother ended up physically lashing out at my mom. And at the end of it all, she had a seizure. So they were on the way to the hospital to figure out this situation. So over the next 24 hours, I talked to my mom on the phone, and it was clear that she really didn't have a grasp of the situation. She couldn't really answer the questions. I feel like she was traumatized because my grandmother had never done this before. And so she just didn't know what to do. What she did know was that she was not ready for my grandmother to come back home because she just didn't know what to do and how to handle this. I ended up flying home from Chicago, maybe a day or so later, and pretty much having to take over. I talked to the doctors, I talked to the nurses, I got kind of a better understanding of what happened. One thing was that she had a UTI. If you have been a caregiver long enough, you might be familiar with UTIs and how they affect confusion, aggressiveness, and other behaviors in your loved one. So she had a UTI, and that was the primary reason, but there were some other things going on as well. But so I talked to the doctors and nurses, and I ended up talking to a social worker who told us that we had the option of sending my grandmother to a skilled nursing facility for just a short term, maybe for a couple weeks, just so we could kind of figure out what was going on, if my mom was going to be able to handle this and those sorts of things. So I said, sure, that sounds like a good idea. The social worker gave me like a stack of papers, and it was a list of nursing homes or facilities in the Dallas area, all over the city. And she told me that I needed to pick one in the next 24 hours because my grandma was going to be released. Y'all, I didn't know anything about nursing homes for sure. Didn't know anything about Alzheimer's. Didn't know anything, senior care, elder care. Again, I was this single bachelorette living my life, but this is how you become a caregiver. It just happens. It's something that we're just thrown into, and this is where my caregiver journey began. And 1 year later, my mom received her own Alzheimer's diagnosis. So for the past 8 or so years, I was a caregiver for my mom and my grandmother. My name is Veronica Shanklin, and I am a full-time caregiver. I'm also a daughter and a granddaughter. I recognize that we, as dementia caregivers, struggle with caring for our loved ones with Alzheimer's or related dementia. I am passionate about helping caregivers navigate this difficult journey with practical resources and support that help them thrive in their role. So the story that I just mentioned, like I said, took place about 8 years ago. Since then, I've become an advocate. I've served on the board of the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Dallas. I'm currently on the board of the Community Council of Greater Dallas. I've traveled to Washington, D.C. for the Alzheimer's Advocacy Forum a couple times. I'm a community educator with the Alzheimer's Association. And recently I started a nonprofit called Dementia Care Warriors, a 501c3 nonprofit. And our mission is to provide non-medical resources and support to caregivers on this journey. We have no control over the things that happen to us, but we do have control over how we handle those things. And the only way to gain that control is to be intentional. And to survive this journey, you have to be intentional. No one's gonna come knocking at your door saying, hey, here's some help. You actually have to seek out the help. You actually have to ask for help. And when someone offers that help, you can't be afraid to accept it. And even for the doctors and medical professionals who might be on this call, it's important that you communicate to your families that there is help, that they can gain control of the situation to a certain extent. And they come to you for some reassurance and some hope. And I'm hoping that you understand that you can give these tools to them on their journey. So now that we have established that there is a way we can get control, but we have to be intentional, let's talk about some tangible ways that we can do this. As I present these ideas, please understand that everything I give you might not be for you at this stage in your journey or ever. However, there will be something here that will make your journey easier. So the question is something Veronica says going to fix my situation? Probably not. As much as I would hope that it would, realistically, we're probably not going to fix the situation. But will it help? And the answer to that is yes. So as caregivers, we are taking ownership of our lives. We're not leaving it up to our families, our doctors, our pastor, our siblings, etc. We will be intentional about doing what we can do to make our own journey easier. So let's talk about some of these tools. Mental health is something that if you are a caregiver, can be a struggle. As caregivers, we often sacrifice our own physical and emotional needs, and the resulting feelings of anger, anxiety, sadness, isolation, exhaustion, and then we have guilt for even having these feelings. These feelings can be a heavy load to bear, and they can lead to mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. Caregiving for a person with dementia can be all-consuming. Depending on the stage your loved one is in, this is typically a 24/7 job. Not only do we spend more hours per week providing care than caregivers of people with other illnesses, we have employment problems because maybe we're still trying to work. We can't take off work. Our employer doesn't understand. Personal stress, mental and physical health problems like high blood pressure just from being so stressed out, lack of sleep, and less time to do the things that we enjoy. Less time to spend with other family members or friends, and then also more family conflict than a lot of other caregivers because there's a lot of back and forth on what we think is right, what our other families think is right, etc. So, and also on top of that, so I'm kind of building a case here for why we need to take care of ourselves. Dementia-related symptoms such as wandering, agitation, hoarding, embarrassing conduct, and resistance or non-cooperation makes our job even more challenging. And it makes it harder for us to get the rest and assistance that we need. So one thing that I want you to understand is that self-care is not selfish. When you think about caring for your loved one, you think about tending to their needs. And so that might be making sure they're fed, making sure they have healthy food and that they're fed, making sure that they're cleaned up, making sure that they have their medicines and, all the things that come along with being a caregiver and the tasks that we do for them. But I want you to understand that caring for your loved one is just as important as caring for yourself and vice versa. In caring for yourself, you are caring for your loved one. So one of the tools, now that I've talked a little bit about mental health, that I want to tell you about is therapy. This can be group therapy, this can be individual therapy. A therapist or counselor will listen to your concerns and screen you for symptoms of depression and assist you in addressing ways to deal with the stress and to come up with coping patterns and things that you can do to cope. I know that for some caregivers, cost might be an issue because therapy is not cheap. And if that's the case, there are a lot of affordable therapy options. Some colleges have psychology programs that offer discounts. I actually was able in the beginning of my journey, the UT Southwestern Psychotherapy Clinic, they have a therapist in training program. So they offer therapy at a reasonable hourly rate. And therapy can go up to, as we know, $150 an hour. As caregivers, a lot of caregivers are on fixed incomes. If you're a caregiver like me, you left your job, so you're no longer employed. So we have to be resourceful, and that is one thing that I am, is resourceful. So I was able to find a therapist at UT Southwest. I called to get a therapist and ended up talking to the actual manager of the clinic. And she had worked with caregivers in the past. And so she said she would take me on as herself as a client, which was a blessing, and which is something that happened because I reached out. So you never know what kind of resources you might find. That was definitely a gem that I was able to find. There's also websites with directories of mental health professionals. There's one called Open Path. There's another one called Talkspace, and there's another one called BetterHelp. And so these websites provide a directory of therapists who provide services at a discounted rate. So definitely, if it's a cost issue, that's not an excuse. You can get therapy for as little as $15 an hour in some places. And you definitely need to talk to someone. Something else to think about when choosing a therapist is to be sure to ask about their experience working with family caregivers. I recently went on Open Path to find a therapist, and you can read their bios and what they talk about. And so it's important to actually do your research and read, or even just ask the questions. The therapist that I found actually has run caregiver support groups before. And so I thought that was really awesome and helpful. So she kind of has a little bit of some insight into what we go through, and she's been a caregiver before herself. So not an Alzheimer's caregiver, but just a caregiver herself. So making sure that you find someone who can relate to what you're going through is also important. A subset of therapy to me is support groups. So find a support group. And now that we've pivoted to this virtual environment, it should be even easier to find a support group because you don't even have to leave your house. The Alzheimer's Association website has an extensive list of support groups in the area that they meet, they have their meeting time, maybe it's Saturday morning at 11. And so it's Saturday morning at 11, you will be able to talk to a group of people who can understand what you're going through. One way that support groups have been good for me is resources. So my mom and I attended a support group early on, and we spoke to a lady in the support group, and she told us about, oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. But she told us about the type of doctor that we needed to see to get an all-day battery of testing for my mom. And so it was, they test for everything from executive decision-making and executive function to reflexes to vision, to see how your peripheral vision is, because that's an issue with people with Alzheimer's, short-term memory. It was literally a long day of testing. Neuropsychologist, that's what it is. And so we went to see that doctor. They did this whole battery of tests, something I would have never known existed. And it really kind of gave us a benchmark of where she was. It was much more expensive than anything that they do at your neurologist or at your primary care physician. And it really gave us more of a benchmark of where she was. And at the time, the doctor said she could still drive. Her reflexes were fine. Her biggest issue was short-term memory. And the doctor said as long as she was driving to places that were familiar, then she should be okay. So the grocery store or church, and to monitor those things. Of course, every situation is different for every person, but I'm just sharing my story as I go along. Also, support groups. Make sure that you find a support group that works for you. So I actually, a couple years ago, I founded a support group for younger caregivers because I found that the support group that I was attending was a lot of older women taking care of their husbands, and then also a lot of older women taking care of their mothers. But they were about 20 to 30 years my senior. And so we weren't necessarily dealing with the same issues across the board. Of course, they were great people. I got good information, but I just kind of wanted to be around a group that was in a similar demographic as I was. And so I started a support group, and we met at Gloria's, the Mexican restaurant, and we vented and chatted and supported each other over margaritas and chips and salsa. So I encourage you to find a support group that fits your needs. And there are tons of support groups. So if one doesn't work, then feel free to find another one. The second thing for you is respite. I didn't even know what respite was when I started this journey. So in case there's anyone out there like me, let me just tell you, respite care provides short-term relief for primary caregivers. It's basically a break. It can be anything from a couple of hours to a couple of weeks, long-term, short-term. There are a few different types of respite. There's in-home respite care, where you have someone come into your house, and that doesn't have to be a paid person. It could be a family member or a trusted friend. There are adult day centers that have programming for senior citizens, some specifically for seniors with Alzheimer's. And then there's also skilled nursing facilities, which are, I think of them as similar to nursing homes, where it's more of a formal environment where you can go and your loved one can stay overnight. Costs can range from free if it's a family member to hourly rates, daily rates. And something that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of times long-term care insurance will cover respite in some cases. And the thing about long-term care insurance is that it's a bucket of money, and people don't want to dip into it because they want to save it till they're in these dire circumstances and they're having to, pay for long-term care. But before you get to that point, just so you could get a break, it might be helpful to dip into that so that you can pay for respite care. I think something else, and I talked about this earlier, about asking for help. So respite and getting a break, it doesn't have to be from a professional or home health company. It might be a neighbor. It might be your daughter. It might be, anyone. I realize that no one is going to care for your loved one as well as you do, but you have got to get a break. I'm guilty of not taking advantage of respite situations myself. I haven't had a break in quite some time. And so finally yesterday I called my aunt and said, hey, can my mom come over there? And so she was so open to it. She was like, yeah, no problem. That's perfect. Sure, bring her by. And so a lot of times people want to help. It's just up to us to ask them because they don't know what to do. They don't know how they can help. And so I encourage you to just ask. Sometimes it might not be the optimal situation, but as long as your loved one is safe and they're in an environment that they will be cared for, then the optimal situation does not exist. So just for example, maybe you have a daughter that can sit with your husband, or you can take your husband to your daughter's house. She is not as patient as you are. She's a little short, with him, and you don't really care for that. But that's her father. She loves him. She is going to make sure that he's safe. And that might not be the optimal situation, but if it gets you a break, you might have to take those couple hours and just let it go. So that's just, an example of how it might not be an optimal situation, but you're going to have to get over that. Just take the break. One thing that I've done in thinking about respite is I've bought cameras for our house. And they're kind of like nanny cams. They're really inexpensive. You can buy them on Amazon. I think I got a package of 2 for like $50. And I have them all over the house so that if I have to run out to the grocery store and have to leave my mom here, she's at a stage where she can be alone for, a few hours. I can always just go on my phone, open the app, and see where she is, see what she's doing. Typically, she's sitting in the same place, working her word search puzzles, but I can always just open up and look and check. Another camera that I bought is the Amazon Show. The Amazon Show has a screen on it. And so unlike the phone where you have to wait for them to answer the phone, with the Amazon Show, you can simply drop in. You go to the app on your phone, hit drop in, and your face appears on the screen and you can see them and you can talk to them and communicate, ask them how the day is going. You know, if you need to give them some instructions to do something, that's another, cool tool to have so that you don't have to worry about them answering the phone. And then lastly, another device I have is a lot of alarm systems have this, but if maybe you don't have an alarm system or you don't have that function with your alarm system, I have a device called MyQ, which is connected to my garage door. Because I went through a phase where she was opening the garage door. And so I needed to know when she was opening the garage door if I wasn't here. She doesn't do it anymore, but it was just good I get an alert on my phone anytime the garage door goes up. So the third thing for you is to reframe your mindset and your expectations. If you continue measuring your loved one based on who they used to be, you will not win in this journey. You have to manage your expectation. And it's the same with yourself. It's not lowering your standards, but you have to take on a new mindset. Over the years, I've learned about a concept called micro wins. So we tend to focus on major victories and we forget about the small victories and the tasks that we accomplish in our daily lives. And as a caregiver, you should be proud of any win, be it big, small, or whatever. We have to appreciate any win that we can make. So I want to tell you about a recent micro win that I have. And this is a story that, unless you're a caregiver, you probably would be looking at me like, that's not really that big of a deal. But for me, it was a big deal. The remote control, the TV remote in our house has legs. It walks away every single night. And every single night, my mom says, have you seen my remote? And then I go on this crazy hunt to find the remote to see where it is. Now, of course, the remote doesn't walk away. It's actually that she takes the remote and puts it somewhere different every time. It might be in a bag, it might be in her purse, it might be in a shoe under the bed, it might be in a pillowcase, it might be in another room in the house. But the remote was disappearing every night and it was driving me crazy. I think it was a trigger for me. That remote was a trigger. But there wasn't anything I could do about it, or at least I thought there wasn't anything I could do about it. Until one day I had this bright idea. I found a really long nylon string. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna tie one end of the string to the remote, tie the other end of the string to this lamp next to her bed. The string was long enough to reach across every corner of the room, so there's no need to untie the string. It's perfectly fine. My aunt happened to be here on that day, so I could go to the grocery store. And so once I set up my little rig, my little contraption with the string, I go to my aunt and I say, oh my gosh, I figured it out. I'm so smart. I was so proud of myself. I told her about it, the string, whatever. She was like, oh, okay, all right. So I go to the grocery store, I come back. And my aunt says, now, where did you say you put the remote? I was like, it's on a string next to the bed. There's no remote next to the bed. And I'm like, what? So I go to the room and sure enough, the remote is not on the string. She untied it from the remote. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Because why is there a string tied around the remote? I didn't have a conversation with her about it. I just did it and hoped that she would, stick with it. But she untied it. So the next step, I put everything back together. I put a huge note on the back of the remote that said, do not remove. Don't take the string off. I put tape on it. Like, this is going to be a permanent thing. You will not be taking the string off this remote. Fast forward, that night, I go back. She took the string off the lamp this time. She didn't remove it from the remote. She follows instructions very well. She did not remove it from the remote. She took the string off the lamp. I'm like, oh, there's got to be a way to fix this. And one more thing, we went on a road trip to Houston. We get to Houston, I open her suitcase. Our TV remote is in her suitcase. Like, this remote is just like this monster in my life. So fast forward to I finally figured out, and I think I now know how much my peace of mind is worth. $40. I found this product called Tile on Amazon. And there are these little small, about the size of a quarter, and you stick them on the back of your remotes. So I have them on the back of each remote in the house, and you have an app on your phone. So whenever the remote goes missing, which is every single night of my life, I go to my phone, I hit Tile, find remote, find kitchen remote, find bedroom remote, whatever remote it is, I hit a button and the remote goes beep, 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 and it keeps beeping until I find it. And so, again, that doesn't sound like much to the average person, but as a caregiver, when you are like losing your mind already, something as small as a missing remote every day can push you over the edge. And so I was just so proud of myself. And that is an example of a micro win. It's not, life altering for the most part. But I'm just like, and I use it. We literally used that Tile, and it was only $40 on Amazon. So it's important to celebrate your wins, no matter how big or how small. So those are some of the things that you can do for yourself. Now we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do for your loved one. And in caring for your loved one, you are in turn caring for yourself. So some of the resources that I want to share that have been really helpful to me on my journey are, first, the Dallas Area Agency on Aging. And actually, I think this is more of a local call, but most counties have a Dallas area agency. Have an area agency on aging. Even like Collin and Tarrant County and other counties have a similar resource. But this has actually been my most helpful organization on this entire journey. When my grandmother was alive, they put grab bars in the shower. They'll install wheelchair ramps. They'll do minor home repairs and home maintenance, like cleaning your gutters or just fixing things around the house. They provide supplies like adult diapers, gloves, bed pads, Insure. They do benefits counseling to help you figure out how to navigate Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance. They have legal assistance. They have a service called My Ride that you can call, and they'll refer you to transportation companies. If you need, we went through that at one point where I was having to transport my grandmother back and forth to appointments, and she was pretty much at the stage, she was pretty much bedridden. So we had to work through that and figure out the best way to do it because it wasn't going to happen in my car. So Dallas Area Agency on Aging is a gem in our city, and I highly recommend you reach out to them and see if you can use any of their services. The Alzheimer's Association, which I mentioned earlier, they provide a wealth of education and connection to resources, events, education events, symposiums. And I actually learned about Dallas Area Agency on Aging through the Alzheimer's Association. So that was one of the resources they provided when I first started this journey. When I first moved back to Dallas and was so desperate for any information about this disease, my mom and I, which was before she was diagnosed, we took an all-day, basically an Alzheimer's 101 class that covered the basics of the disease, like things that communication, behaviors, what to expect, like, what paperwork we needed to get in order, so many things. And that class was really, really helpful at the beginning of the journey. So they have help for all stages of the journey. I would recommend you reach out to them. Something that people don't like to talk about is hospice. So my grandmother was on hospice for 2.5 years. Most people feel like hospice is, I actually had a conversation this morning with someone randomly about hospice, and they really felt like it was giving up. They felt like not putting their loved one on hospice was them fighting for their loved one. And hospice is a wealth of resources. I probably wouldn't have those last 2 years with hospice. I had a CNA So just some of the services that they offer. I had a CNA who would come give her a shower, a bath 3 days a week. I had a nurse, an RN that would come and check her vitals and just her status and check in on any questions or anything I had. We had a massage therapist, a music therapist. All of her medications were covered, medical equipment, like, wheelchair, just anything that we needed. They provided that, and it was just so helpful. Hospice also provides 5 days of respite. So I talked about respite earlier. In the earlier days back, when we could still travel, my mom and I were able to take a couple of trips because we were able to take advantage of that 5-day respite service. And there's just so many benefits. And people always ask, when do you call hospice? A couple of things to look for: drastic weight loss, and that's one of the things that they look for in their evaluation. Consistent falls. Those are 2 things I know that they look for in their evaluation. But I encourage caregivers, if you even think that it might be time, to ask your doctor for a referral and get an evaluation. All they can say is no. And actually, when my grandmother was first evaluated for hospice, we were told no, and I just went back a few months later to a different company and we were admitted to hospice. So hospice is something to look into. Adult day centers. One of my favorite adult day centers is Friend's Place. And there's a Friend's Place up north and there's one south that we go to. But they provide, adult day centers provide respite care during the day, just like they said. Some are specifically for people with Alzheimer's and dementia and have staff who are specifically trained for that. Others, sometimes in the earlier stages, when your loved one might be more dependent, you can also go to their senior programs. Like each city usually has a senior center and they have senior programs throughout the day. So that's definitely something to look into. And then also some skilled nursing facilities have a day program as well. So definitely things that you want to look into. And then last but not least is something to think about is your care team. You are the advocate for your loved one. And if you don't feel that your doctor is meeting your needs, whatever they may be, you have the right to find a new doctor. My mom's first neurologist was just not good. He basically did what a lot of doctors do. He told us she has Alzheimer's, prescribed Nepozil, and sent us on our way. And I remember clearly when we left that appointment, as we were walking to the car, telling my mom, I should have been a neurologist. If that's all that he does, I should have been a neurologist, because I just felt like he really didn't put forth much effort into this appointment, into this process or anything. He didn't give us any resources. He didn't give us any hope or reassurance. It was basically, here, go to the pharmacy and get this medicine. That's all I can do for you. So we went through a couple of doctors and then we finally, settled on one geriatric physician who was a gem. She's actually moved to another city now, but she was a gem. She had bedside manner. I felt like she cared about us, and that's what you want in your care team. Something to think about with association to your care team is having them prescribe occupational or physical therapy to have someone come to your home, especially in the later stages when you're doing things like transfers and lifting, and your loved one might not be as mobile as they used to be, walking, fall risk, those sorts of things. Having them actually in your home showing you how to do these things can be really helpful. Like transferring from the bed to the wheelchair. I had a therapist show me how to do that in such an easy way that I would have never known had she not come to my house. So I definitely want to encourage you to talk to your doctors and ask about having occupational or physical therapy come and show you these things. So today we have discussed some concrete ways you can be intentional about taking control of your caregiver journey and the circumstances that we find ourselves in. In conclusion, I kind of just want to share a couple of videos. My mom and I, and even my grandmother, we are music people and we're dancing people. And so we tend to make these TikToks and these videos, and a part of this journey is enjoying the moment. So even though they might not remember the next day that they had so much fun, or even the next hour that they had so much fun, or that they, participated in an activity that you felt like they would enjoy enjoying the moment, and that goes for them and that goes for you. Take as many pictures as you can, as many videos as you can, because you will be so glad that you did. So I just want to share these videos with you really quick.
She gon' rock, 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 rock. Bend it over, bend it over, let me see. Bend it over, bend it over, let me see. She gon' rock, 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 and we gon' rock, 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 rock. Come back over here, don't let me. Take me into your loving arms.
And that is the end of my presentation. So you can go ahead and open up the conversation if anyone has any questions or comments or want to share your experience or anything you could relate to that I said. Let's actually go over here to the chat and see if there's any questions here.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Cindy Powell. Hi, my mom just passed this last December, but all the things you said, Veronica, are so important. All those memories, doing all the things, just like that remote control, all of those stories. So if anybody is discouraged, it's a beautiful time in their life. And I just always felt like we were blessed that she wasn't taken so quickly. And we've kind of felt like she didn't know how bad it was, but to be able to be there with them, you just shared some great stories. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm sorry to hear about your mother.
Veronica, this is Stacy. I was a secondary caregiver to my grandfather, who was diagnosed before Alzheimer's was even given a name.
Wow.
I was primary caregiver to my grandmother, and then primary caregiver to my mother for 16 years. So I have over 30 years total in caregiving. If someone had handed me the wealth of knowledge that you just passed along to this group, life would have been a whole lot easier and a whole lot more fulfilling from the end of the caregiver side. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's in this position, I would encourage you to take Veronica's experience, her insights, her lists, everything that she said. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Yeah, there were Veronica, there were a host of comments on the tech, the gadgets that you use, and that really has to have, it just de-stressed the situation. Your story about the remote was wonderful, but it's little things like that do push you over the edge. And the tech enabled you to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. So you could get to the next one, and it just made the moment more joyful because you weren't stressing over that.
Absolutely. And you don't know what you don't know, so yeah. You hear presentations like this, or you talk to other caregivers, or you go to a support group meeting and you're talking to other caregivers and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, try this, this worked for me, you should try this. So definitely, but you have to be intentional about talking to those people and finding those resources.
Yeah, so the word to the wise too is check your long-term care policies and see if it covers respite. Mm-hmm. See if it covers in-home care. Just, I don't know, you buy those things and then you forget to look. And so that's a really good suggestion.
Hi, I have a question, Veronica.
Sure.
This is Vicki. I really enjoyed all of your moments and the great advice of making moments with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I was the caregiver for my mother along with my father. how would you feel? I would like to know more about where you are at and the path of Alzheimer's and dementia with your mother at the present time.
Okay. So like I said, my grandmother passed in 2017. She was on home hospice. My mom and I, it's just my mom and I here. And I am a person who doesn't really subscribe to the number system of stages. I'm more of a beginning, middle, end stage. And that's because it overlaps. Everything overlaps. You might be in stage 6 and do something that was stage 2. You know what I mean? Like I can't keep it together. So I would say she's probably in the middle to late stages. She's still independent to be able to get up and get dressed, feed herself. I'm of course cook all meals and manage medications and things like that. Just it's really at this point a lot of short-term memory issues. Like it's pretty much non-existent. We are getting to the point of not necessarily recognizing me, which is an interesting point to be because, like I said, things overlap. It's not concrete. She might not know me at 3:00 in the afternoon, but by 4:00, you know my name.
Yeah.
So it's everything just is kind of wishy-washy right now. There's not really a concrete stage. And then also I'm at a stage where I know I'm going to have to heed my own advice when I talk about home health or respite or those things. Like I said, I haven't had a break in weeks, and I just needed to call and get a break. We just went through the terrible ice storm, here in Dallas, and our power went out. It was freezing cold. And, when you have a roommate who can't remember that the power went out or why it's out or, what's going on with the power, and they want to turn on the TV and they want to, why is it so cold? And I was like, okay, this is going to drive me crazy. So I ended up having a friend of the family come and pick us up and take us to their house. So we went and stayed there. She thought we were in a hotel.
Amen.
Perfectly fine, perfectly pleasant experience for her. But for me, just the decision making, there's something called decision fatigue. That's just a general term, but I 100% apply it to caregivers because your day is just 24/7 decisions, and not just for yourself or another adult. And it's not like for your kids, it's actually for another adult. So, we're just making it day by day and, trying to enjoy the moments and trying to be intentional about making those moments. So, thank
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. My mother passed away back in June, and now I'm trying to navigate the waters. My stepfather, who was a co-caregiver with me, is now exhibiting quite a bit of symptoms for possibly dementia or Alzheimer's. So I am concerned and looking at possibly, entering back into the caregiver role for a second time around. And that's why I was interested in your program and in your enlightening views, and we all have so much that we can learn from each other, and there is no blueprint.
Right.
And part of my journey that I learned with my mother is if you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
Because
Have you
they're
ever
all,
participated in a support group?
Vicki,
yes,
Vicki,
yes.
this is Carol Stabler. I'm on the board of Aware, and I would encourage you to go to our website, awaredallas.org, and look at some of the information that we have there, and possibly join us
for some of our events and meetings and things might give you a little more insight into what we do and how we help both the patients and the caregivers of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Thank you. I most definitely will.
Yeah, the majority of the people, of the members, the aware members, have either had very direct experience as caregivers or family members or loved ones, or, you know, we're in it because we've touched it. And
Consider
we
it a
want to make
shameless
life a little better for everybody else.
Consider it a shameless plug for Aware.
Yeah,
Sure.
very good.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any other questions for Veronica?
Thank you so much.
Thank
Veronica.
you. You were wonderful.
Actually, I just wanted to say, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, if you're a caregiver, you have a question about anything, you can find Dementia Care Warriors on social media. It's just @CareWarriors on Facebook and Instagram. And then our website is just dementiacarewarriors.org. There is a resource tab on there, and it has products. And so some of the products that I mentioned are on there, but it also gives you some other ideas. You might see something else that might be helpful for you. So I would encourage you to go. We have books. There's a lot of books on there that might be helpful for you as a caregiver. So dementiacarewarriors.org, and then go to the resource tab and you might be able to find some. I'm looking at the comments, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for your feedback and for your comments. And thank you to Aware and to Barbara for having me today.
Really appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Veronica's been, as long as I've known her, she's been a caregiver, but we both come out of the advertising field for a number of years beforehand. And so it's funny how life changes just like that, and you become a caregiver. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is Aware's, this is our final webinar for the year, for this particular year, but we're going to have more. And anybody who signed up for these webinars, we will notify you of the next series. And speaking of which, I do want to give out one more shameless plug for Aware. We have the Aware Affair coming up on April the 16th. At the lovely Dallas Arboretum. It's going to be an open air event, and it's going to be fun, and we still will have masks. Okay. I mean, we're not going to go according to the governor's advice. We're still going to require them. But we're really looking forward to this event because it supports everything we do. This is our main fundraiser of the year. And if you go to awaredallas.org /events, and you will see the Aware Affair, you'll see all the information about it. And we'd love to have you come, become a member of Aware, and join our cause, because we are unique in the community, because we support the quality of life for the caregivers and the projects and the programs that help those that are in the middle of this, in the middle of Alzheimer's and dementia experiences. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, and look forward to the next webinar and the Aware Affair. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you,
Thank
Veronica.
you.
Thank you, Barbara.
My mom says thank you in the background.
Okay.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Barbara.